Hello, new interns. We are back with another interview, a really exciting one. And today we're going to be interviewing Logan Wickman-Hudnut. She is a marketing and social media manager intern for a cool company. But that's all I'm going to say, and that's all I'm going to do to introduce her because everything else is going to come out through the course of this interview. So, first things first, I want to ask Logan, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited to be here and I can't wait to have this talk with you. Thanks for
Awesome,
having me.
of course. So, as part of, kind of the first set of questions we normally ask, just to get to know a little bit about you, I'm hoping, Logan, you can tell me a little bit about where you're from. Where'd you grow up, basically?
Well, I was actually born on the East Coast, so I was born in Boston, but I have been living in SoCal my whole life, specifically in the Redondo Beach area.
Very nice. All right, so you've been, you're not necessarily a native, but you've been a lot of places, so that's awesome. And what school are you going to right now? What are you majoring in, and when do you graduate?
So I'm currently a first year at UC Berkeley, and I'm undeclared right now, but I'm probably gonna major in film here.
Oh, nice. Okay. And okay, so you've got some time left.
Yeah.
My goodness, students from Berkeley get internships really early. That is- Congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you.
How so far, how have you liked your experience at Berkeley? Kind of like the academics and students.
I mean, I've been having a really good time here. I think, I've learned a lot in terms of the kind of social and working with all different kinds of people, especially in a place like UC Berkeley where, you have a lot of really high achieving people in the same place. And so I think for me, I was, I love learning. I always have. So I love going to school. I think for me, I've actually learned more in terms of that social manner, which has been really, really interesting. But I'm very grateful to be able to be here, and I've really enjoyed my time here so far.
And in your free time at UC Berkeley, what do you enjoy doing? Kind of, do you have any hobbies or any time wasters? I don't think UC Berkeley students have time wasters. If you do, what are those?
Well, I mean, I'm majoring in film, so I consider myself a very creative person. So I really enjoy doing photography on the side, when I can, especially in a place like Berkeley, there's always things to take photos of. So I love going out on photo walks, things like that. And I also love reading and journaling because I think that both of those have just allowed me to become a better speaker and also a better communicator because, being able to read different perspectives and different narratives, things like that, has allowed me to become more empathetic, I think, throughout my life. And then journaling to kind of get all the thoughts out. It can be, college can be a lot. So having that, just pen and paper that will always be there to listen to me is really, really awesome.
What you said about reading is really, really cool because I haven't heard a lot of people point that out. But I totally agree with you. Reading, it totally helps your speaking and just understanding more people. Because even though it's fiction, maybe it's drawn from real experiences. So that's
Yeah.
really cool. That's a good insight. And your campus is beautiful. I've been there many times as well. So
Thank you.
now, as for your position and where you're working currently, where you're currently interning, could you tell me what's your formal title? I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but what type of an intern are you? Who are you working for? And what kind of a company are they?
Yeah, so I'm a marketing and social media manager intern, and will it's called Wilder, and
Oh,
it's basically a startup company, so very still really really young, barely like 1 years old, and basically what we are is a new social media app that focuses on promoting positivity and not selling your data to third parties, so it all stays in the app, which
nice.
with social media these days, you never know what's out there. The algorithm can be a little too good, if you know what I mean. So, um, yeah. And I think for me, it's just been really amazing to not only work with also women who are in this industry because, it can be really hard to find women in technology. So being able to work with a lot of amazing women has been really awesome. And also trying to build up a platform for Gen Z because, we are screen natives. I guess you could say. And that has been very rewarding for me to work and try to promote that, on a college campus or just to the wider Gen Z audience overall.
That is beyond exciting because what you're doing is, I would say that's one of, if not one of the biggest dreams that many students, especially in the Bay Area, obviously in the Bay Area, that students have, working
Right.
for a startup and an app startup, a social media startup. Super cool. And now I know it's Wilder and not Wilder. I've been saying it a lot.
It's okay. I pronounced it wrong in the beginning too. It's all
Okay,
good.
not the only one then. And in order to kind of land this role, did you go the normal route, which is sending large amounts of applications? Did you have a referral, or did someone from Wilder reach out to you? How'd you get this job?
Yeah, so I started like my LinkedIn, I think last September or October because I'd heard about it, but I never thought about making one. Because I always thought it was more for, business or like to be honest, like my parents' generation, and I
Oh,
didn't really think of like I just didn't think that I really needed it. And then
yeah.
I got to Berkeley and I was like, Berkeley's probably the one school where I absolutely have to have it, considering. Um, and so once I had that and, setting up my profile, I learned a lot of just about, what makes a good LinkedIn profile, things like that.
Mm,
And I started kind of just applying to what I could because I am a freshman and I really want to enjoy my time. I don't want to rush things. And I think, especially here, that can be hard because
yeah.
it's again, like I said before, a lot of high achieving students. And so, I sometimes feel like there's this pressure to always be doing something like amazing or revolutionary. And so I think for me, changing it from that to just being, okay, this is practice for me to put my resume and how to format that,
Mm.
writing multiple cover letters, things like that. And so I don't remember how many jobs or internships I applied to prior to Wilder. I don't think it was that many. If it was anything, it was just like a resume drop, nothing too tedious. Um, but yeah, so I came across it on LinkedIn and I was like, oh wait, this is kind of cool. Like let me just again, submit it, forget about it is usually how I think about it.
Yeah.
And then they ended up reaching out to me and then I went through the interview process and I was like, actually, yeah, this is awesome.
That's incredible. Okay, you did it. Um, you did it the hard way, and that's the way. No, and that's great because I hear a lot about people, they have referrals, or they have something, and I'm wondering, where are the people who just apply? And I honestly thought you might have said that it was through a referral, but you got it through an application, and that's fantastic.
You.
Now, I have a lot of questions about this, but the first one is, what were you kind of putting into the search bar? What roles were you interested in during this period of applying that you were in before getting the job?
Yeah, so I was doing a combination of, I would say, marketing and entertainment. So I would be putting in production assistant, which is more of the creative production focused things. And then I also put social media manager and marketing intern. And, I was definitely focusing more on the marketing intern because what I found with this, if I put social media manager was more like a full-time job. They were looking
Yeah.
for, a senior or a junior or senior that they would hire full time. And so I was mostly focusing on the marketing intern things. And I mean, it is the amount of scrolling you have to do simply
Oh,
to look for what application you want to do. Because I think for me, there's so many jobs out there. That doesn't mean that everyone is going to be right for me. And so what I really wanted to focus on was, if I am working as a full-time student, but also any internship in general, I think it's really important that you align with the values of not only the company, but what your job actually entails. Because I think a lot of times it can be, oh, it's the name, it's the brand of the company, which is great. If that's like, your main priority, that's awesome. I think for me, it's also, I want to enjoy the work that I'm doing because I think, that will make me learn even more and be more appreciative of the experience that I have.
so you took care to kind of not just apply to everything you saw. You sifted through and found some good stuff.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
I know you mentioned that you don't remember how many applications you sent out in that round, but I want to press you for maybe kind of a guesstimate. Was it in like the like under 10 or over 100? Kind of what was the ballpark of this period of applying, all these applications that you sent out?
I would say in terms of the applications I actually submitted, I would say probably maybe 10 to 20 at the most.
Okay.
But I think for me, it was definitely more in terms of just how many I saved, because I probably saved like 50 jobs, right? But
Yeah.
once I started picking through and was like, okay, I wanted also a paid position, so I filtered out the ones that were unpaid or the ones that were like 20 to 40 hours a week. I was like, I cannot commit that amount of time right now. So I think, for me, it was just saving as many that I saw the title and the company and I was interested in, maybe a little bit on the job description. But in terms of actually applying, once I narrowed it down, it was probably, I would say 10 to 20.
Okay. And that's a good number. You mentioned saving jobs. I never realized how much fun and how easy it was to scroll through and just hit save on all the ones you'd like to apply to. Once it gets, once you go to your saved jobs and you have to apply, it's like, oh my goodness,
Yeah.
the amount
Yeah.
of.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, how long was it after applying to Wilder, if you remember, that it took for them to get back to you when they initially reached out?
I think I definitely had forgotten about it because I think, I had submitted it, but I probably didn't give it a second thought.
Mhm.
And it was probably maybe like 2 or 3 weeks afterwards that they kind of reached out to me and, said, oh, we saw your application. We'd be interested in having an interview with you. And so that period was, I think, the longest between reaching out to me and then actually scheduling the interview because I think that was also a week apart. But I had that first interview, I had my second interview like that same week. So that was really awesome because I was like, oh, I think they like me, right? Like, you don't have to wait long for that timeline. So, I think overall it was probably like a month all
Like
in.
sum total from the moment they reached out, or it took a month from your
Yeah.
application to being hired.
Yeah.
They reached out, I'm assuming LinkedIn or email, and then you had two interviews afterwards, correct?
Mhm.
How were those?
They were super fun. I actually really love being interviewed. I think, at least for me, I think we grow up in a society where talking about yourself or, being proud of your accomplishments is not something that is seemed as okay. I will say especially like sometimes for women specifically. And
Sure.
so I think for me, being able to talk to my future boss, but also the CEO of the company and they're both women again and just being like having a conversation. I it felt very much like a conversation between two people like I already knew them. And so
Uh,
I think that was a really good indicator that, I got along with them as people, but also in terms of my job. And so I think it was really fun to be able for them to ask me, questions, but then, again, like I said, it's a conversation for me to ask them and be able to talk about my experiences, why I think I would be great for this role. And, they would ask me really fun questions about being innovative. Like if they gave me a $500 budget, like what would I do with that
oh,
to kind
that's
of
a
have a, yeah, so I think also like thinking on the spot, right, is a huge one. I think especially in marketing, they always throw in those really fun questions that are probably you're not going to be able to prepare for,
yeah.
which I find really fun. I have background in improv, so for me it's really exciting to
You've
think on
done
the
it.
spot. Yeah.
That's cool. That's a fact. And I've noticed that interviewees who've had the most interviews that have a conversational feel or turn
Mhm.
into that always leads to success. So if any of you are watching this right now and you had an interview that didn't feel like a conversation, then maybe, I don't know, maybe start applying elsewhere. I'm wondering kind of, oh, actually, what did you answer to that $500 budget question? That's a really cool, if you can briefly describe it. I'm sure it was.
Yeah. Honestly, I think I said a combination of things. I think one thing that I would do would be to kind of hold a kind of campus-wide scavenger hunt at UC Berkeley. And so what I talked about was kind of, using the app as a way to post, okay, go basically on a photo scavenger hunt, and then we would tailor it to each campus specifically in terms of like landmarks or restaurants or, wherever people live, things like that.
Yeah.
And then people would kind of put them on their account on the app and tag it. And then whoever kind of got all of the challenges done first over I think I don't know if I gave it a 24-hour period or 48-hour period, would get the $500 as a prize to split between like the teams. And so that was one super fun thing that I think would be super awesome.
You came up with
And yeah, I don't know if that was I don't remember if that was what I said. I think it was something like that.
yeah.
Um,
That's
but
the job. I would have never been able to have come up with that. That's incredible.
thank you.
So I'm curious, what experience were you applying to this job with? Was it very,
Mhm.
very minimal or very extensive? Kind of what were you bringing to the table in terms of job history or experience?
Yeah. Yeah, so I this was like October when this whole, the month-long process is. So I really just started college still. So I didn't really have any experience in college specifically. So mostly it was from my high school experience.
Mhm.
And so I worked as director of publicity for like my version of like student council, student government in high school. And I also had a summer internship, which was at a different marketing company that focused on marketing campaigns for charter schools. And so more of an educational lens. And, I learned a lot there. And so I talked about my experience in that, work experience and school experience. And I think for me, combining those and also my marketing experience in my volunteer organization throughout high school kind of,
Mhm.
talks about, okay, I've worked in marketing in different facets.
Yeah.
So, and I've learned a lot from each one. And so now I kind of want to continue that in terms of an actual company for, I'm using social media to promote a social media app, right? So kind of culminating all of these into one.
That's a very solid resume for coming out of high school. I'm not
Thank you.
gonna lie. That's and how did you so that previous internship, I'm assuming it was either a summer or it was a longer over an extended period of time. How were you able to get into that?
Yeah, so that was summer of 2020, so that was completely remote. And it was just I think it was, yeah, 8 weeks long.
Mhm.
And that I don't remember exactly how that happened. I think so my dad actually works in charter schools, and
Okay.
so he knew someone who had mentioned that there was a kind of internship program for students. And
Mhm.
so I went on that website and did the same thing. Applied, submitted the cover letter, the resume, which, looking back on that, I was like, wow, I can't believe I submitted that because, I didn't know, I didn't have experience. And so
Yeah.
it was good at the time, but now with what I've learned, I'm like, oh, I would never submit that again. But anyway, um,
Yeah.
so I think it was kind of word of mouth for that one. And then I, did the same thing, applied through the website.
And for your volunteer during high school, that also sounds really cool. How long were you doing that for?
So it's it's a 4-year commitment, so you do it all throughout high school. And it's actually kind of, I don't want to say like a sub organization, but it's kind of like the junior organization because there's one for, women just out of college or whatever, and you can do that one. And then there's a high school specific version. And
Sure.
so my mom worked in the main one, and so I grew up going to these events and like volunteering all the time and things like that. And so when I got to high school, I was like, oh, I'm so excited to do this myself. And so I did that. And then, throughout the years, I was like, I really wanted to be president senior year because this has been something I've been wanting for a long time. And so,
Yeah.
through my experience in the marketing position, and then I was also fundraising vice president, which I learned a lot for that because I, didn't have experience in fundraising. And
Sure.
after that year of doing it, I was like, wow, this is, I have a whole new skill set.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't even think about it like that until after. And then, senior year I was president and I was like, yay, it was culmination of everything.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I'm always impressed anytime I interview a UC Berkeley student. Oh, what you guys have been able to accomplish. But yeah, that experience must have been that the fundraising aspect was probably is probably valuable for you right now being at Wilder. So that's cool. And my last question, kind of related to how you earned this position, is what did what was what did your interviewers really want to know about you? What were they most interested in?
I think it was a combination of, how I work in my thought process. I think marketing, even though it is a very analytical thing, I think it is also very creative. And so, understanding, just my personality and what vibe I give off to kind of my thought process in terms of how I would approach, promoting XYZ or sharing this and that, or what I would post about. So told them a lot in terms of also my dedication, I think was kind of seen through that. Um, but I would say personality. I think especially if anyone is doing marketing, I think a lot of it is personality, who you are, how you think, things like that, and then the technical stuff can come later. But I would definitely say just for marketing specifically, make sure that, you're being your genuine self. Like don't pretend to be someone because you think that's what they're gonna like. I
Mm.
think for me, going in with that, being like, I'm just gonna, be myself, and you can only pretend for so long. So I would don't do that. Be
Yeah.
yourself. Be genuine self from the beginning.
So your experience, it showed that you were capable of the role, but it was your personality was pretty pivotal in sealing the deal, so to speak, right? Okay.
Yeah, I think, and I did my research on LinkedIn of who was going to be interviewing me beforehand. Um, and she's not my boss, but at the time she wasn't. And so I, looked at her LinkedIn and saw like, okay, what have her past experiences been and where did she go to school, things like that. And so, I think because of my genuine interest, but also she happened to be involved in the same things. Again, that is where it was really easy for us to kind of have that conversational interview versus a really, stressful professional interview because, I happen to have those things in common with her and really emphasize those in my answers, which I think also really helped.
And that's a really good tip as well for anyone watching, researching or doing some degree of research on the people who, if you know, are going to be interviewing you. It's really, really helpful. Now, more about going into your position specifically at Wilder. You mentioned it's part-time. I'm curious to know, would you characterize it as more project-oriented or more support or kind of a mixture of both?
I would say it's a kind of a mixture of both. I think at first it was definitely more a support role because I was mostly doing the content, drafting and copy and things like that, and posting pictures. So it was mostly just kind of helping them grow their social media based on, their objectives.
Yeah.
Um, they recently went through a rebranding the past couple months actually, and so I asked because I, want to gain more design and like experience in graphic design, and so I was like, is there any way I can kind of sit in on these brand design calls just because I don't know what that process really looks like. And so I would say that was a really cool chance to get involved in a project of, the whole entirety of the company and its brand is changing. And so that was really cool to sit in on. And then with our ambassador program, we have a college ambassador program. And so partly what I've been doing for the spring semester is kind of helping manage that. And, I've done a couple tabling events on campus, hosted my own events, and just kind of making sure that there's a supportive and collaborative community with the ambassadors, considering we're 100% remote. None of these, I haven't even met them in real life yet. Um, so just doing what I can to make sure that that's a good community, even if we can't really interact in person.
Yeah. Yeah, that actually sounds like a lot. And how many hours, if it's all right for me to ask, you mentioned it's part-time. Are you 10, 20 per?
Yeah, yeah, it's 10 to 15. So it ranges on kind of the week. I will say ever since, the rebranding, it kind of varies on the week, honestly.
Sure.
I think sometimes if I'm doing most of the design for the posts, then that will take me more work. But if, there's photos that we had from an event, that's a lot easier on my end because I can just, kind of post those to the Instagram account.
So I'm gonna kind of go in chronological order here, but I want to make sure that I have a grip on what your role is. And you mentioned the social media aspect. You mentioned as support, but to me, I kind of consider that as its own, as a project of its own, because that's a lot, copy and just the images. Um, and that's something I'm assuming you are maintaining. So you started with that and you're continuing it, and then on top of that, these other things have kind of gone added. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Now, for social media, what outlets is Wilder using?
So mainly right now we're using Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and TikTok are our main ones.
So,
And yeah, so my I'm managing Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter mostly, and then we also have a TikTok intern. So that she was hired around the same time as me, so we started together. And she does, the TikTok account.
mm,
And then she's in charge of Twitter replies. So I post the main tweets and then she replies to people, on whatever is going on.
sure. So walk me through kind of the content process of
Mm.
posting, let's say, on either Instagram, LinkedIn, or Twitter. What does your boss kind of tell you that they'd like a post, but it's ambiguous and you kind of have to generate it, or are they very specific? And where are you outsourcing the materials, like let's say images? How do you kind of put this together, and how often?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's definitely been a learning process, and constantly kind of changing what works best for me. But I think what I've been kind of trying to do is, on Thursday and Friday of the week before, I kind of spend time brainstorming everything that I want to do for the following week, just so that I have an idea of, what the account feed is going to look like and, if there's things that I have to design or if I already have the material for and I just need to write the caption for it. And so once that's done, usually I put it in, we have a content bank in our Notion. And what happens is usually my boss goes through that and, writes comments or whatever, she has to say about them. And then once I fix those, she'll approve it and then I can just post it on said account.
Oh, that's cool. And this content bank is, I'm assuming, shared with the other intern, the TikTok intern.
Actually, for me, it's just for me because TikTok is mostly kind of on the whim, so it's a lot more like trend following, so you can't really like plan it. You know what I mean? It's hard. So like for example, the content bank, like I only use it for Instagram and Twitter. I'm sorry, not Instagram and Twitter. Instagram and LinkedIn because Twitter and TikTok are very like
Impromptu.
spontaneous. Yeah. And so that can honestly it can be really hard sometimes because you're trying to come up with something that I don't have a lot of experience in Twitter. I never had it until this position. And so I think for me, that was honestly the hardest platform to adapt to because it was trying to find, short and sweet because it is a tweet, right? But
Yeah,
also making sure that it's kind of, it's like the brand and it's said in a way that Wilder would say it, but
yeah,
also you might have a, little comment about something that's like, a little bit more political, So just like finding that balance is still definitely difficult for me. But I think, yeah, that's why for me, I'm a planner. So for me, the content bank is a lot easier to do.
I'm really glad you said that about Twitter, the fact that you didn't have prior experience because I still don't use Twitter, yet I hear of all these companies saying it's a major outlet, and I never knew that.
Yeah.
And it's hard to use because it's like what percentage of wit do I put in here, or how formal should I be? It's super difficult. But
Yeah.
What are some examples of, because I'm curious, how will their, well, you've mentioned how they're trying to position themselves, but I'm curious as to how that kind of comes across in a social media post and how you think of that. So what would be like an example of maybe one post that you remember vividly that you're proud of or that worked well?
I would say recently we've done a bunch of posts from the event that I hosted like for Valentine's Day, and so I posted a lot of photos from that, which has been really great. And in terms of more of the graphics, we had this design that was, kind of Wilder playing on a record label. So it was like the vinyl was Wilder in a record machine, and I think it was just kind of cool things like that. Or on a billboard, it was like, you're doing better than you think you are, and like our signature green.
Mhm.
And so I think for me, it's a combination of, people want to see people, especially on a social media app, right? So, I want to see real life people, real faces, especially if it's Gen Z, people my age, right? And so I think a combination of that, and then the combination of kind of more of the graphic, fun design, we might do um, some self-care tips for the weekend or things like that. So I think having a combination of content is really, really important, um, because then, you get a little bit of everything, but it's still catered to who we are.
Right.
And so, but I really enjoy looking at the pictures of people or events that we're doing because I think that's really fun.
So it sounds like, the content varies, but generally speaking, it's tied to people and
Hmm.
how can we help people or showcase people. So that's cool. And there's no, it doesn't seem like there's a hard quota for posts you have to get out, but I'm assuming you know, there's a certain degree between slacking and producing a lot. So, but
Yeah,
clearly,
yeah,
so
yeah. Yeah.
now you mentioned the event you hosted recently for the ambassador program. Is this you're trying to Wilder's probably trying to spread this program as far as it can or as far as it can manage. Did you create the ambassador program, or are you now managing it, or are you just managing it for your campus?
So the ambassador program was already a thing when I was hired, so I did very minimal work because I joined basically at the end of like the fall semester, so there wasn't a lot that I could really do since it was kind of ending,
Mm.
since I did join the team officially in November. But right now is kind of a combination, I would say, because I'm the main communicator with the ambassadors on we have a giant Instagram group chat, and so I'm usually the main one communicating with them. Um, but then as far as my campus, I'm actually not an ambassador. We have two Berkeley ambassadors that I helped hire. So I sent out messages to clubs I'm a part of or people I knew just being like, "Hey, we have a new ambassador program for spring. Please
Mhm.
apply." And so I also kind of helped with the hiring process for that. So I interviewed, I think, three or four potential candidates, and talked to them about, all the usual questions.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think right now I do my best to kind of balance it because I do want to get the name out there on Berkeley campus. And sometimes, with everyone's crazy schedules, sometimes I am the only one who is available to do these kinds of things.
Mhm.
Um, but, also making sure that the actual Berkeley ambassadors too can get involved and spread the word, things like that.
Sure. So you are facilitating the program, like to a large extent, it sounds. You're the communicator. You're helping the communication between all the ambassadors across, I don't know how many schools, but I'd imagine quite a few. Um, that is a large role, not gonna lie. And so I have one more question about that, and that is, what are they? So are they on their own? The ambassadors need to have some sort of direction. How do they know what to do or how to kind of market Wilder?
Hmm.
If you aren't, you're facilitating it, but they've already received their instruction, or how does that work?
Yeah, so my boss handles more of the kind of technical and task oriented things for them. So basically how it works is, once they get the offer, there's kind of like a handbook or kind of our rule book in terms of just what you're posting and, things that should be in the photo, things that should not be in the photo, and just, being aware of how, you're coming across on social media because you are representing our brand. So, we don't want anything that's gonna,
Yep.
taint that image or make people misinterpret it or things like that. And so how it works is they kind of have monthly tasks, and this could be anything from a TikTok to a reel to an Instagram story, and also have them planning an event at their said campus.
Mm.
And then what happens is they upload kind of either the videos themselves or just proof that they posted to kind of like the Google Drive folders so that we have content that I can repost, but also because they get paid based on their individual tasks. So
Oh,
according to whatever, yeah.
cool. And as Wilder is going through this rebranding, and you've sat in through a lot of meetings, is it have you gotten a hold of all the jargon, the industry jargon yet? And was that like an initial barrier at first? How are you holding up on that end?
I think honestly, that's a good question. I think there wasn't anything with the rebranding, the calls that I was sitting in, there wasn't anything that I didn't understand. It was more just like, okay, how the heck did you design this? Like
Oh, okay.
on a blank slate. That was more my thing because I think, once you see it and it's done, you're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. But like starting from scratch and getting to that point,
Super difficult.
yeah. And because, my boss was telling me and I was seeing how we still can't even use the new templates yet because there's more changes that, our CEOs want to be made.
Mm.
And so I think for me, it's just like the constant trial and error of a rebrand, but also in a startup is just like there's so much unpredictability. And so just being really, on your toes and knowing that it's probably going to change again and again is just kind of a given. Um,
Yeah.
so I would say that's just something to keep in mind in general, probably if anyone is looking to work at a startup, it is very much trial and error, and you're probably going to have to, I don't want to say rejected because I don't think it's that strong of a situation, but just like you're going to have to redo probably the work that, you know, you've
Oh,
submitted or things like that.
that hurts people sometimes
Yeah.
more than others.
Yeah.
How it is. You'll write. I'm sure you've written copy and you've had to edit it when you thought it was perfect. Um,
Yeah.
that's the worst. But thank you for explaining your role. That was awesome to hear. Basically, the internals of an actual startup. And I want to get your final thoughts on your role and your experience. What is, as far as you can tell, what's the most valuable thing that you've learned so far at this internship with Wilder?
I mean, I think it's just like I said, trial and error, just being able to adapt really quickly. I think sometimes, I definitely have taken it personally where it's like, oh, none of this, even though I'm like, I just spent what I feel like is so long on this, and you're telling me you don't
Right.
like any of it, or like none of it is,
Uh-huh.
Um, so I think, not taking things personally is a huge one for me. And just professionalism in a 100% remote workplace has been really interesting because I, have things on campus here where I'm like in a full, business professional, and I go there and everyone is very much more of like the strict, reserved,
Mhm.
traditional, businessy person. And I think, having that formality, but also, that openness to giving and receiving feedback, or suggestions, or just having those difficult conversations is really, really important. And I would say that in work, but also outside of work as well.
Sure, sure. And has this internship has it pushed you in a direction career-wise? Has it narrowed down your search a little bit? Um, you know, how has it kind of affected your direction in that sense?
Well, I've wanted to work in entertainment for really as long as I can remember. And so I think for me, it's, do I want to work in the creative production side,
Mm.
or do I want to work more of the business marketing PR side? And so I definitely think that this internship, just for the marketing social media portion, has been really helpful to reemphasize I do enjoy marketing, so it's definitely still something that I want to gain experience in. Um, I personally am not a very tech person, so I don't know if like app startups are exactly where I would want to go to. I love the idea and I love being a part of the team.
Yeah.
I just think in terms of the process of, how we're talking about it or how we're doing it is not where I want to go.
Yeah.
But again, I'm super happy to be here and I've loved it and I've learned a lot. Yeah, I want to reemphasize
Of course.
that.
We don't think it's definitely not a criticism of your job. I get that. It's fantastic experience is what you're saying, but you do have a vision that you kind of you know where you're going. And last question, Logan, what is some quick advice, some good advice that you can give to others who would be interested, others who are trying to get internships in general, and maybe even the one you have now?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've tried to integrate advice as I've been talking, so I hope some of that's already been helpful. But I mean, I think it's just, I want to reemphasize what I already said, really spending time to figure out the role that is right for you because there are so many opportunities out there and I know that they're hard and I know that it takes so much work. And that's why, spend the time to really focus on, okay, what is this company's mission? What is my job within that? Like, what is the purpose of my job? And figuring out, prior to even applying, what are the most important factors for you? I think that was something that for me I wasn't really sure of. Besides the fact that I did want to have some sort of paying job while in college, but
Mhm.
obviously everyone wants to be paid. So what else on top of that is important to me and what I want to gain out of an internship experience? And so I would say with all those things being said, however, don't rush it. I think for me, I was like, oh, I have to have a super elite like internship this summer going into sophomore year so I can get ahead. Like, don't rush it. I think everything falls into place the way it's supposed to be. And I think college is, you're here once. And I think it is really important to spend that time wisely and not rush it because it's probably going to be over before you know it. So I would say, yes, apply, but also take the time to enjoy it, relax, and just kind of take it day by day too.
Great. Thank you for that advice. Very reassuring and definitely helpful. And for anyone watching, we're going to be wrapping this up, but feel free to reach out to Logan through LinkedIn. And if there are any other sources that she's willing to put out, you can reach her there as well. But otherwise, I'm going to close this out, and I want to say, Logan, thank you so much for coming and sharing your experience at Wilder. I was very excited, and I was not disappointed by what you had to say. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
Of course, you take care.